Everybody, my name is Mike England. Oops, can you hear me now?
Yeah.
My name is Mike England. I'm one of the two lead directors of housing. In a moment, I'm going to ask Keith Hill to introduce the Residents' Commission report that was published a week ago tonight, and to explain what it says and why the Commission came to its decision. Before I do that, though, if people have got sight of the agenda, I'm just going to suggest a slight change to it, because on this agenda we've got an introduction by Keith, followed by feedback from resident members of the Commission. I think what might be better would be, after we've heard from Keith, if we go straight into questions from people in the meeting, and then doubtless the resident member of the Commission and other Commission members can answer at that point. And after all, the main purpose of the evening really is to hear questions from residents. So is everybody happy with that change? If we just spend that extra time devoted to questions, people okay with that? Okay, thanks very much. In which case, can I introduce Keith Hill, the chair of the Residents' Commission?
Thanks, Mike. Let me come to the front of the meeting to embrace my audience more closely, and I'm sure that you'll be able to hear me. If you don't, make a sign, but I've had years of voice projection. I think we'll be able to hear me. Let me say that I am very pleased indeed to be here at this special forum in order to present the report of the Residents' Commission on council housing. It's very nice to see so many of you here. It's very nice to see so many familiar faces. Indeed, it's very nice to see so many who were here at last week's meeting as well. But as somebody said to me, there is a lot to absorb, and it makes absolute sense to take the opportunity to hear the report, to hear the recommendations, and to ask questions and get it, as clearly as possible in your mind. And let me also say, of course, that you've got, I think, our report in front of you. I was very pleased when a member of the audience came up to say that he had read the report and commended its clarity and the ease with which you can understand it. So I really do recommend you to read the report. Don't be daunted by it. It's a very, very accessible document. But I'm, in due course, going to explain the main points to you, and then we will be delighted to hear your views and to take your questions. Actually, this is only the second public presentation of the report. The first, as Lisa said, was made to the Council's Policy and Accountability Committee a week ago. That seemed to be the right thing to do, since it was that committee which first proposed the establishment of a Residents' Commission way back in November 2014. So a year later, after a huge amount of work, which I'm going to describe to you, we have a report that is of the greatest importance to all council tenants and leaseholders, indeed I would say to all the residents of Hammersmith and Fulham. The presentation I'm about to make does contain a number of radical proposals about the future of council housing in the borough, which initially at least I know that some will find challenging to accept. But before I come to the substance of our report, I wanted to share with you all some notion of the approach we adopted to our work, and some notion of the sheer scale of the work carried out by and on behalf of the Commission. Ladies and gentlemen, above all, we wanted our work to be carried out with the utmost transparency and independence. There were, as Lisa has said, no councillors on the Commission. We wanted it to be clear from the word go that we were approaching the task set for us without any prejudgment whatsoever, with total honesty and openness. And that's why we began our work with 9 public hearings on all the key issues facing the Commission. And these hearings were held in community centres and residence halls in all parts of the borough, as well as here in the town hall, and they were advertised as well as possible, and there was an open invitation to all to attend. Indeed, we even filmed the hearings and put them on our website for all to see. And in the end, we received a colossal 19,000 visitors to our website. In the course of our hearings, we received evidence from and questioned over 40 witnesses. We paid study visits to 9 housing organisations inside and outside the borough. We attended 19 estate engagement events in the borough and 22 sheltered housing coffee mornings. I think I personally spoke at 29 tenant and resident association meetings. In addition, we've now sent out 6 newsletters successively to each and every tenant and leaseholder in the borough, updating them on our work. So that's nearly 100,000 newsletters in total. We've really made a big effort to share our work and to share an understanding of what we've been trying to do with every person affected in the borough. Moreover, to aid us in our work, a number of substantial reports have been commissioned. A stock condition survey by Savills, a financial appraisal by Capita, a survey of tenant and leaseholder opinions by SKV Communications and TPAS, and an overarching strategic stock options appraisal by Hammersmith Fulham Council. And as a consequence, we have read through thousands, probably hundreds of thousands of words, and we've met, discussed, digested this massive information and formed our conclusions in the course of as many as 30 commission sessions and workshops, and all this in a period of just 6 months. This has been a huge commitment by every single member of the Commission, and on behalf of the Commission, I'd like to thank our independent members, Peter Bevington, Joanne Drew, and Anthony Mason, for their hard work, tremendous collegiality, and the wonderful quality of their advice. And I'd also like to include in those thanks, and in the same terms, our independent TPAS advisor, Tom Hopkins. But ladies and gentlemen, above all, this has been a residents' commission. The majority of the commission were local Hammersmith and Fulham people, 9 residents, 6 tenants and 3 leaseholders from every postal district in the borough, selected by a residents' panel drawn from the borough's TRA forums, all of them volunteers, all with job and other, including family commitments, and who, because they wanted to do the right thing for the borough, have devoted a vast amount of their lives in the past few months to the Commission. And I'd like to name your resident commissioners: Shirley Cupid, Paul Acudo, who is not with us this evening, John Garzi-Quick, Matthias Kalubia, Andy Robson, who is not with us this evening, Sophia Saraiva, who is not with us, Kim Shearer, Anthony Wood, and Lorna Winter. I personally believe that all the people of Hammersmith and Fulham owe a very great debt of gratitude to these commissioners. And ladies and gentlemen, whether you agree or disagree with the recommendations of the Commission that I'm about to announce, I believe that this audience should express its thanks to the Commission in the conventional fashion. Ladies and gentlemen. Very much indeed for that. Ladies and gentlemen, I turn now to the recommendations of the Commission. I emphasise that these are only recommendations. There are recommendations to the Council. It will be for elected councillors to decide whether or not to accept and go forward with our recommendations. That is the proper democratic way. When it set up the Residents' Commission in December of last year, the Cabinet gave the Commission 3 main tasks. Firstly, to consider the options for empowering residents to take local control over their homes. Secondly, to find the best way of maximising investment in existing council homes. And thirdly, to see how new homes could be built. To these 3 tasks, the Residents' Commission decided to add a 4th task. Because of what we learned from our many discussions with residents and housing staff, we decided also to draw up and present a new model of management to deliver better housing services in the borough. But in whatever we studied and recommended, we promised to do two more things. One, to safeguard council homes and estates for the future, and two, to protect tenants and leaseholders' rights and keep rents and service charges at levels residents can afford. Remember, the reason the council set up the Residents' Commission in the first place was to implement the present administration's election pledge to, and I quote, work with council housing residents to give them ownership of the land their homes are on, close quotation marks. So the election promise was to work out how to give residents the final say in deciding the future of their homes and estates. And the original question for the Residents' Commission was therefore, can this aim of residents having the final say be achieved if the council remains the landlord, or can it only be achieved by stock transfer? In other words, if the council retains the stock, is there anything that can be done to stop a council disposing of an estate, for example, to private developers, if it was so minded? And the answer we got, probably from the best housing lawyer in the country, was no. The law permits a council to do anything it likes with its land, providing it's not criminal, and providing it goes through some form of consultation, which it does not need to accept the result of. So our conclusion was this, that the only guarantee for residents is if they themselves own the land. And the only way they can do that is by forming a resident-led housing association. We recommend, therefore, a stock transfer here in Hammersmith and Fulham. We recommend the creation of an independent, standalone Hammersmith and Fulham Housing Association. We recommend that this housing association should be modelled along the lines of the community gateway housing associations we saw working well in Lewisham and Watford. In the community gateway model, a residents' membership body which all residents may join makes the final decisions. The second task given to the Residents' Commission was to consider how to ensure the greatest level of investment in the modernisation of homes and in repairs. Now, it's important to remember that the main source of investment for council housing is revenue from rents and service charges. At the same time, all housing bodies borrow to invest and pay off their borrowings over time out of their rental and service charge income. However, in this second task, we faced an unexpected challenge. What we didn't know when we started work earlier this year is that the next few months would see some of the biggest changes in central government policy towards social housing in a generation. In particular, the compulsory sale of high-value voids, council homes which have fallen empty, and the Chancellor's decision in the summer budget to impose an annual 1% reduction in social housing rents over the next 4 years. Now, the rent reduction is good news for rent payers, but I have to tell you, it is devastating for housing authorities trying to invest in their stock. The 1% rent reduction blows a huge hole in this borough's housing finance, From rent reductions alone, Hammersmith and Fulham Housing now faces a gap of around £80 million in its housing budget over the next 10 years, £400 million over the 40-year period of the business plan. That's money that was going to be spent on replacement doors, windows, bathrooms and kitchens across the borough over the next few years. Now, one solution, you might say, is for the council to borrow the money. But because of its so-called debt cap set by central government, it's not allowed to do so. So what is the solution? The truth is that providing the improvements residents want and expect is no longer possible without radical change. Staying the same is no longer an option. A traditional argument in favour of stock transfer has been the greater freedom of housing associations to borrow from financial institutions. And the truth is that only a housing association can borrow on the scale required here in Hammersmith and Fulham. The Residents' Commission believes that the case for stock transfer in order to be able to provide new doors, windows, bathrooms and kitchens is compelling. And the same argument applies to the building of new homes, the third task set for the Commission. Everybody knows that there's a housing crisis in London. Many residents have spoken to us of their worries about homes for the younger generation. In any case, we know that central government consent for a stock transfer will depend in part on the offer of new homes. We believe that there is scope for new build on land owned by Hammersmith and Fulham Council. Moreover, our survey of residents' opinions showed that many residents are open to the possibility of development. And we've reached the view that the building of at least 500 new homes in the first 5 years following transfer will have to be proposed. The point is to work with residents and not against them. And that, we believe, will be easier in a resident-led organisation. And only a housing association will be able to borrow to build the new homes so urgently needed. Our fourth task, the one we set ourselves, concerns a better way of working for housing services in the borough. More customer-focused and resident-led, with greater sensitivity to the distinctiveness of different estates and neighbourhoods and their different needs. In our report, we describe the core principles of this new organisation, and we intend to publish the detailed blueprint, as we call it, as a supplementary report shortly. So, what are next and future steps? Well, our next step is to present our report to the Cabinet when it meets on the 7th of December, and that's the point at which the Commission will formally have completed its work. As I understand it, the Cabinet will make its decision on our recommendations at that meeting. Before that date, we shall all be alert to the Chancellor of the Exchequer's statement on the Comprehensive Spending Review on the 25th of November, which amongst many other things will indicate whether or not the government's transfer programme is to be continued. A Hammersmith and Fulham Cabinet decision in favour of a stock transfer will give rise to an intensive period of negotiation with central government and the Greater London Authority, in which the issue of the debt write-off associated with the transfer will play a part. I see no reason why that should not be achieved with flexibility and a modicum of goodwill on both sides. And that will be followed by the ultimate democratic test, as the law requires, a tenant's ballot, and a test of opinion amongst leaseholders. But that is for the future. In the here and now, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to conclude with some thanks on behalf of my colleagues on the Commission. Firstly, if I might say so, to you, the residents of Hammersmith and Fulham Council Housing, who have treated us with overwhelming warmth and courtesy. Thanks also to our many witnesses at our public hearings, to our hosts in the outside housing bodies we've visited, to our expert advisors, and especially to the directors and officers of Hammersmith and Fulham Housing, who have been enormously helpful and supportive. And our thanks as a Commission, above all, to our programme team for their superb and untiring support. That's Charles Hyde, Dorothy Sturzaker, Aisha Abesi, and Labab Lubab. Ladies and gentlemen, the recommendations we have made in all sincerity, believing them to be in the best and necessary interest of the tenants and leaseholders of Hammersmith and Fulham Council. And I commend our report to this meeting. Thank you all very much indeed for listening.
Thank you very much, Keith, for that very clear explanation of the Commission's recommendations. We now come to the time for people to ask questions of the Commission about their recommendations and why they've come to the conclusion that they have. If people could indicate by raising their hand if they wish to ask a question, it would be nice if you could say who you are in asking the question. I don't think we've got a roving mic this evening, so if you could also bear in mind that you might need to speak up when you ask your question. We've got plenty of time, so if you could bear with me, I'll try and make sure that we get around to everybody who wants to ask a question. Who would like to start us off?
Can you hear me, everybody? Can you hear me? I'll face you, shall I? Pauline Hutchison, and I live on the Maystar estate, which is in West Kensington. And what I would like to know is about this housing association, a standalone housing association. What does that actually mean? Because I think there's a lot of confusion when I've been speaking to people about this. You know, do we have to create a housing association? I don't know. So could I have some more information I can take back to the residents where I live? Thank you.
And let me make a start on that one, Maureen.
It's Pauline.
Pauline. The answer is yes, you will have to create it. We are not recommending a merger into an existing housing association, partly because we know that housing associations don't always have a tremendously high reputation amongst residents in the borough. But secondly, because we know that we're looking here at a very large and substantial stock of homes, about 17,500, and we believe that that number is viable and sustainable in its own right. And thirdly, because above all, we sense that there is a very strong feeling of local identity here in Hammersmith and Fulham, and that actually residents here in Hammersmith and Fulham would respond very positively to the idea of an independent, standalone housing association. But actually, yes, the council would have to work with you as the residents in order to create such a housing association. I don't know if any of my colleagues want to add anything more on that.
Can I ask a supplementary?
Of course.
Would we have to take the existing council staff and the service contractors that we've got at the moment with us when we're creating this new entity?
Well, I see Shirley nodding at this point, so why don't you come in on that one, Shirley?
Okay. In terms of staff, yes, most staff would be something called two-pid over. They have employment rights. So staff who are on sort of permanent contract to the council would go across. And there's In terms of contractors, that would be something for discussion, but quite possibly yes. There are options, as I understand it, and my colleagues can put me right, that you know, in terms, because there are contracts that exist, obviously. So there would be options about buying out a contract or ceasing it. But what happens in others, as I understand it, and we've been and visited other places, often they do move across, but over time, of course, existing contracts come to their end, and then there are opportunities to either renew those contracts or to do something very different. And we've seen things as diverse as continuing to outsource contracts, or we've seen in other organisations where repairs, for instance, have been brought back in-house, but not right at the beginning of the new organisation, but somewhere down the line. Hope that answers.